Hi everyone, this is Rico Figliolini. I'm host of Peachtree Corners Life mainly and publisher of Peachtree Corners Magazine. But today, as we always do it once a month, is Brian Johnson, City Manager of Peachtree Corners, is my guest for Prime Lunchtime with the City Manager. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, he was across the ocean, across the pond, as some people say, doing some great work for the city, looking to bring more economic impact to the city of Peachtree Corners. So that was the Smart City World Congress,
Smart City Expo World Congress.
in Barcelona.
That's correct.
You got a chance to be able to meet quite a few companies and tell us a little bit about what went on.
So that Smart City Expo is the world's largest smart city conference. And there's over 30,000 participants in that conference. And we were invited for the second year to be part of the Metro Atlanta delegation, which is part of the U.S. delegation to that conference. And this year we were asked to speak and about Curiosity Lab. And as part of our speaking engagement, we unveiled a video that we had made about Curiosity Lab, and we can talk about that in a second. But we unveiled it, and then of course we used the remainder of the conference beyond that to meet with lots of different countries and companies within those countries that there might be some interest in utilizing our facility. And of course, the advantage there is that we get activity based on people coming in and using it for testing or even just demonstration. And so we talked to a lot of potential interested stakeholders here, and in some that are even interested in being partners and having a long-term relationship here. And so now our real work starts, and that's all the follow-up to all these, the speed dating that we just did, which is, quick, here's what each of us are, here's exchanging of cards, let's get back in touch. And
it's always about the follow-up.
It is. And, in some cases, just like we do in real life, sometimes you're not super interested in the follow-up. You're just trying to be nice.
Sometimes.
And other times you really are, and you're just hoping that both parties ultimately find value and both parties are interested. But there's plenty of times, just like if we remember back when we were dating, that you could be interested in that other person and they're not interested in you, or they're interested in you and you're not interested in them, or both of you are interested but the details just don't work out. Maybe that you're going to go be on opposite sides of the globe or whatever. And so a lot of things have to work out for it to ultimately be, consummated in some sort of a relationship.
I think a lot of business people that go to trade shows understand this, because you do meet a lot of people. You do have to go through, and sometimes it's really funny. The ones that are really interested may not be the ones that do anything. The ones that are more polite and looking less interested may be the ones that are doing. But it's certainly an effort to be able to get through the legion.
It is, and we don't go there and set up any kind of like booth per se. And we're not doing. These are ones that we've been invited to speak at, and that's where we get a lot of momentum. Is you're on a program. People will then go and sit in the audience and listen, and then you get a lot of you hopefully generate buzz by what you present. And so at the end of those talks, we have a lot of success with people coming up with their cards and, that was really, interesting. I didn't know you guys were doing it. We'd like to come out and visit. And so we get more from that than if you were trying to go out there and just kind of like cold, just go up to somebody cold and be like, hey, this is who we are.
And it's always better putting out that information. It's like putting out a real unofficial line and just seeing if anyone's going to bite.
It is, and the cool thing about this one is for the first time, we've had PowerPoints that we show to show some pictures of things, and it's evolved from renderings, and you've seen the evolution, Rico, and we've had some renderings before about what we thought it was going to look like or hope it'll look like, and that kind of went into some still pictures of what it does look like, even though it's still not done.
Right.
We still have a little bit more signage. We're actually tweaking some of the.
I noticed that. Yeah.
But this time we unveiled a video in which it was going to show, or does show, not only how the lab operates now, but how it could be used to operate in the not too distant future as technology is getting more advanced, and so it kind of hopefully puts into perspective when people hear about this and they're trying to envision
Yeah.
or trying to take that imagination part out of the equation and actually show them what it looks like in real life, and then show them the invisible part of what makes our lab unique, which is all that.
You know what's great about it? Titan Pictures did a great job on
They did.
putting that together. The fact that we have a live lab, that the drone shots of actual real cars on an existing road and meshing that with animation, really good animation about what that road can do, really, I think, pieces it together. I think people can better imagine that when you start seeing all the connections as you're driving down that road.
And that was part of the intent was, just like you just brought up, connected vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, a vehicle driving down the road being able to communicate with other things. And, terms are oftentimes V to X, vehicle to everything.
Right.
And it's vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to vehicle to, you have all these, but until you see how much communication there could be,
Right.
In a real live, like video format where you're like, oh, wow, a car really could be, getting all this data and sending out data of itself to other people. It puts, it puts things into perspective without you having to imagine it.
Yeah, and in especially with all the things going on now, when you think about the electric car vehicles coming up from some major companies that are pushing out electric vehicles now, and even with the Elon Musk truck that was introduced the other day,
Right.
Or the bulletproof glass
Glass
didn't
that
quite
didn't,
work,
right.
But and the fact that it looks like it's one of these vehicles from those one of the role playing games on Xbox, but these vehicles are out there and they're programmed eventually that they could be updated to drive on these roads. So all this stuff is happening now. It's not like this is not out there. So this is the perfect time to be doing this.
I mean, we literally, as we talk right now, have a driverless shuttle operating on a road that has human-driven vehicles at the same time.
Right.
I mean, this is a public street that has a driverless vehicle on it. So it is happening right now.
So the fact that we're doing this, you've met a lot of people there in Barcelona. Do you expect? I mean, are there any companies in the pipeline right now that you can talk about that may be doing things at this point?
Well, it's hard to say on that, just because these corporations get real squeamish on their name being thrown onto something that we haven't executed an agreement. I can say this much: where we've got a lot of interest is companies that are headquartered in some of the in countries that we've had some discussions.
Okay.
So a lot of it is pushed by a country who has a big company that is headquartered in that country, and that country is interested in that company that comes from that country having more of a presence here, and this is an opportunity. So, we had really good conversations with some of the Nordic countries that were there, with Canada, with France, with Taiwan, and we of course executed a intergovernmental agreement, or an MOU, really, between us and the Taiwan U.S. Trade Office. And we executed that a couple weeks ago, so we actually have a formal agreement with them. And then South Korea. Those are countries that had, delegations there that came over and were really interested in continuing conversation, because they have specific companies that are in their countries that they would like to maybe use this and either expand their presence or, in some cases, establish a presence in the U.S. And this is a location that they're considering. What we tend to be up against, and it was not just Peachtree Corners, it was all of the Metro Atlanta delegation. is
So there was the U.S. section, those zones.
yeah,
the
so we had a
expo?
big pavilion that was the US and it had other locations in the US. And then part of that big pavilion, we had a Metro Atlanta section.
Okay.
And it was kind of, the southeast really because there were a couple other companies that are not necessarily just in Metro Atlanta. But anyway, as we're talking to companies, there's always a initial interest from foreign companies or foreign countries that when they're coming into the US, they're either going to they want to go to Silicon Valley or New York City. Those are the two areas that they're like, oh, if we want to establish a presence, we want to go to those two. And so there's a lot of conversation, and we're getting some traction about discussing that the Metro Atlanta area has a lot of tech going on, more than people realize.
You have Alpharetta being one of the.
Alpharetta is a great one. You've got, Tech Square downtown,
Right.
With Georgia Tech. You got what we're doing. You've got a bunch of things here that offer some advantages. You have a lot of Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered here. You've got a massive fintech
Yes.
presence here.
technology.
Yeah, financial technology, a fintech presence here.
Yes.
You got great easy access because of the airport. And then when you kind of lay out those kind of things, and then you remind them that, yes, Silicon Valley and maybe the, New York City Metroplex may have more of the tech, companies and startups than we do here per se, but they would be a much smaller fish in a much bigger pond and a much higher cost of living than to be done here. And so we spend a lot of time, having to convince or at least get people to understand that there's a unique opportunity here that they may not have realized. And so that's, it's a challenge sometimes. Sometimes people just want to go with, if they're going to come in, they're, they're like just focused on Silicon Valley. And if they can't make it, they can't enter the North American market through Silicon Valley, they're not going to do it. Sometimes that's the case, but other times they're like, you know what, that's interesting. You bring up some, some things to consider. And of course, sometimes we get companies who are like, yep, we like the Metro Atlanta market.
It's going to take time. I mean, the Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners is only how old now? I mean, really.
September 11th.
Right. So, I mean, it's young, and we're in a state that I think more and more is willing, certainly in our city, we're willing to do what is needed. But also, it doesn't hurt to have a state that maybe is willing to do more for technology, incentives of various sorts. So, it's going to take a little time to get there, I think. But it's good that we're here first.
I do think that also the state of Georgia is starting to really take notice of Curiosity Lab as maybe another example and another amenity that they can point to when they're meeting with. We had the governor's smart city policy advisor was up here 2 weeks ago. He came up to be presented and to see Curiosity Lab with his own eyes. I mean, so they're starting, there's movement there. And then it looks like the Department of Economic Development, the board of directors for the Department of Economic Development may in fact actually have one of their annual meetings here at Curiosity Lab next year in 2020.
Oh, neat.
Just because they're starting to say, okay, we're hearing a lot of this. Let's have a meeting up there. So we're starting to get noticed at the state level. And
that's great for
it
the
is.
State. That's great for us. I mean, they want to bring business into the state, so it's all good. Having low unemployment rate only means, having
yes,
more
I mean,
jobs
all
and
of the
economic
things that you
impact.
can throw out there to a company who's considering this area you want. So hopefully we become one of those things on the list of advantages that the state of Georgia offers.
Yeah. So cool. Now that we've caught up a little bit on the global aspects of where we were, where the city's been, and Curiosity Lab. Oh, it always takes up a little bit of time of our 45 minutes or so together because it's a real big part of what the city's doing.
Right now, it is. We have a narrow window of opportunity, I think, and
Yeah.
so we want to get as much market share as we can and as much visibility as we can. I mean, the one other thing that I can say is anytime a city is new
Hmm.
and people are not used to calling it a city and everything, there's been a struggle, and all new cities in Georgia have had this, a struggle with getting people to understand that Peachtree Corners is a city.
Right. The largest
And
city in
right in
Gwinnett
Gwinnett,
County.
people are still like, no, I thought that was Norcross, or
Right.
and when Norcross has been around for 100 years, you understand.
And
But
we were part of, I mean, we were considered Norcross. We had a Norcross address. I mean, that was the other
yeah,
aspect
even
of it,
though
right?
this area has never been in Norcross,
Right.
it's just, and people also don't realize mailing addresses and zip codes have nothing to do with the city limits. But that being said, it's been a struggle for the city, and I know my communications director, Judy Putnam, has worked very hard to try to get traction on people recognizing that we're a city. And it's just not, but within the last 12 months that Google has actually put the what is it called, the knowledge panel,
Mm-hmm.
which is that box. If you Google something, it's kind
Right.
of on the right,
Right.
top right there. And it's only been within the last 12 months we finally got them to do that for the city.
Isn't that amazing?
I mean, we're almost, we're 7.5 years old.
Yeah.
But
Well, and it took a while for even I think there's only 3 companies. You know, the drop downs where the city drop down when you're doing an order on Amazon or other companies.
there's some company. AJC still does not recognize Peachtree Corners as a city.
Right? Isn't that crazy?
And some of it may require the next census in
Maybe.
next year, the 2020 census, to actually get there. But I will say that Curiosity Lab has done more in the last year to put Peachtree Corners' name out there than all of the other efforts, just because it's unique enough that people pay attention versus some of the other great things that we've done, but there are things that all cities or a lot of cities do, and so
Right.
people are like, okay, great,
Right.
they're doing a new town green. Okay, lots of cities have gathering
trails
spaces
and
or
stuff.
trails or whatever. Again, great stuff that we
Right.
want to do for our residents, but it's helped things. So
Cool. Yeah, for sure. There's lots when you do Google Peachtree Corners and Smart City. I mean, there's lots of stuff that pops up, so that's a good thing. So let's catch up a little bit about what's going on here now in this further in the city and some other things. Pedestrian Bridge. I hear the banging from my house every once in a while. It echoes depending on how the
atmospheric
environment-
conditions,
yes.
right?
You can hear the bing, bing, bing. But it started, right? So it's getting to be put up. How
It
far
has.
along?
So they're driving the pilings
Right.
in, for the foundation to anchor the foundation.
Right.
They're about done with that, so we don't have to. But we're still looking at maybe February, March, laying the span in.
Okay.
And of course, this is all not going to weather permitting and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And then maybe mid to late summer of next year it being done.
Wow.
So
That's not bad. It's getting finally there.
it is. I mean, it's happening.
Can't
So
wait to see it. There's also supposed to be a new building going into town center at some point, I guess. Have they gone past the renderings? Where are we with that? That's the Uncle Jack's
Mead
meat
House
house.
and Xfinity.
Xfinity, that's right. I almost finished.
So yes, the final unconstructed building on the only commercial building, because we
Right.
still got the townhomes that are going in,
Right.
but
That's right.
the final undeveloped parcel is literally at the corner of Town Center Boulevard and Peachtree Parkway.
It's right before, like, when you make your right you see First Watch there.
It's in front of First Watch, and it's between First Watch and 141,
Okay.
and it's right next to.
It's going to be
It's
right
in
on the
between
same level
Lazy
of that.
Dog. It's going to be equal to Lazy Dog. It's going to be as close to 141 as Lazy Dog.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was imagining trying to figure out where that was going to
No,
actually
it's-
sit. So it's
So if you
City.
looked at a
Okay.
map, Lazy Dog is a parcel, and
Yeah.
then as you're heading north, looking
Right.
north,
The next
the next parcel
right immediate.
is
Okay.
is the one that Uncle
Alright.
Jack's Meat House and Xfinity will be.
And
will
that's
be
going to
going in.
start probably. Have they filed for stuff with that?
They have.
Okay.
So that's really started.
Oh, okay. Cool. There's no other construction besides the townhouses going up.
Right now, no.
Yeah. And the 75, I think, there. And once that's up, that's the rest of it is pertaining to maybe that 6-7 acres on the other side. And we're still looking. There's still no. General
No
idea about that?
definitive, council has, there have been some suggestions about some things that could be, that could go in there. Council's kind of, just smoking it over right now. We definitely are watching how the town green is being activated and used, and we want it, whatever we put there, we want it to be a value add to the town green, to public events.
Right.
So I think that there will be some component that is a value add to public events.
Okay.
And then I know that there's some interest in some kind of a performing arts venue of some sort.
God
I don't
knows,
think
I
it'll
would
be
love to
really
see that.
big like Sandy Springs, but it would be
yeah,
a
that's
formal, they have a big one.
Yeah, that's it.
But I do think that there's interest from council on there being some performing arts component to it. So if we can make all of that work right there, I think that's.
I mean, you have the height there to be able to take it up. It doesn't have to sprawl wide. I mean, Sandy Springs is a sprawling place, but if you take it up a little bit, you can still do a nice 500-seat theater and event space for banquet hall and stuff like that.
That's
over
correct.
there, and, art gallery and stuff.
Yep.
Cool. That's good. Earth Fair is moving along a little bit. I understand we published something in Peachtree Corners magazine that's coming out the end of this week. Actually, I should be getting that today at some point. The magazine's delivered, I believe. But the Lidl, if I'm Lidl. I keep doing that. It sounds like it should be Lidl, but it's Lidl, right?
It's Lidl.
Boutique. It's a boutique supermarket that'll be coming in.
It is. I mean, it's the. I guess you could call it literally the brother of Aldi.
Yes, that's right.
Since it actually came out of
that family.
And it was two brothers
Yeah.
that actually have splintered over time into three. They all are from the same. Aldi, Lidl, and Trader Joe's are all from the same.
Okay, that's right.
So yes, it does appear that is what's going in there is, but I think it's fair to say it's a boutique grocery store.
Yeah, the RaceTrac down the road on 141 on that right hand side going north. I think they finally have flattened enough land. How close are they to actually
Getting pretty close. I mean, that was a extremely complicated and costly site work to get that thing ready to go vertical with a building, because you not only had a large hill that you had to excavate into, but then there's also a stream.
That's right.
And a stream buffer that had to be dealt with, and so it was an expensive one. But I think RaceTrac's pro forma probably showed them that you've got so much traffic going north at the end of the day up 141 because so many people work down into Atlanta, but they live in Peachtree Corners, Johns Creek, Forsyth County.
Yeah.
And we've got about 55,000 cars that pass that location every day.
As of today, at least.
Right, as of today. And so I think when they were looking at, when you consider that getting gas or swinging into a convenience store, people want to do it, they want to go right in, right out on their way home. Because, going in on their way to work, people usually are leaving their house at the last possible second to get to work. So they don't oftentimes have time to do it on the way into work, but on the way home, they're not having to be home at a certain time for, the boss to not get mad at them.
Yes, just like, me.
Right. And so.
At the tank of gas and I'm waiting to.
Yeah. And so you're wanting a convenient way to get in and get out. And right now, if you think about it, if you get on to Peachtree Parkway at 285 and you're wanting to stay on the limited access portion,
Mm-hmm.
there is no right in, right out between 285 and I think we talked about Abbott's Bridge
Bridge, right.
up in Johns
That's
Creek.
the only one on the right side, right? That's
On the
right.
right side, right. And, we've got a big quick trip
Mm-hmm.
at the corner of 141 and Peachtree Corner Circle.
Yeah.
But that is a extremely difficult left in, left out when you have rush hour traffic.
The interesting part is I don't think it will impact them too much because they get so much traffic coming out from Peachtree Corners from that.
I don't
other
either.
side That I think the RaceTrac will just get their stuff really from that Johns Creek Forsyth.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that's their due diligence probably identified that, look, we're in such a unique position right now that it's worth us spending the amount of money to get the site.
Yeah. Because that was a lot of money, a couple of million maybe.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine.
To do that.
I mean, it's a lot.
I kept thinking, wow, just to move all that dirt to put a gas station. But
Yeah.
that RaceTrac's going to have, I don't know how many pumps probably on it.
It's going to have a lot. It's going to be a big one.
Yeah, they're not doing it for a little.
No.
It's going to be bigger than QT, I think, as far as pumps and store.
Probably. It's going to be
store stuff.
comparable to that,
At least.
certainly. So,
Wow, lots of stuff there. We talked a little bit also about redevelopment, maybe, and what may be coming up on that. Did you want to share a little bit more on that?
yeah, so it looks like at the beginning of the year, council is going to be amenable to at least considering a recommendation I'm prepared to make to them, and that is for us to go ahead and stand up a statutory authority. And by that I mean it's an authority that is granted to cities and counties, similar to our downtown development authority, but it's a redevelopment authority. And it's
So what's the difference between that?
well, so each one has some unique tools at their disposal that oftentimes city government itself cannot partake in. But each authority is a standalone authority in its own right.
Right.
It has a level of independence that allows it to, float bonds, incur debt,
Right.
own property, execute agreements, be involved in construction projects. And the Downtown Development Authority, its scope is in an area that we define as our downtown.
Which for most people that may not realize, what is that?
I mean, it's hard without a map. You've got to look into, but it's kind of like our central. It's kind of like our central business district. It's like Tech Park. It's, the Forum and the town center. It's down into where Dick's Sporting Goods and Publix
Right.
and Target and
So along that 141,
Right.
in and out. Okay.
and there's some Holcomb Bridge Road area out like where Holcomb Bridge and PIB and.
Okay.
So that's kind of our downtown. And so the Downtown Development Authority has the tools that it has at its disposal can be utilized in what we determined was our downtown. A redevelopment authority has oftentimes similar tools, but it can use it in areas that are either defined as a redevelopment zone or it's a parcel that has been developed once, and now there's interest in redeveloping it into something else.
Okay.
In some cases, just something newer
Right.
of the same thing, but it's redevelopment.
Okay.
So it's not, undeveloped property that's never been developed, and now the redevelopment authority is there to redevelop
So it doesn't
something.
have to be an area that's predefined necessarily.
It could be,
It could be, but it doesn't
but
have
no,
to
it doesn't have to be. And so its purpose is to, again, redevelop
be. Right.
certain things. And so, some of the advantages they have, one of the big advantages that they have that cities don't is they can sole source contracts with organizations for, the execution of their primary mission. So, for instance, A redevelopment authority's mission would be to redevelop property. And they could end up, in kind of looking into and exploring different opportunities for redevelopment, and could come across a company that's interested in doing something, and they start talking and they kind of hammer out the terms of a deal.
Right.
They can just straight up say, we want to do this deal with you. If the city was doing that, at a certain point, we would then have to publicly bid it and open it up to everybody.
An RFP or something.
An RFP, and then we have certain constraints, like city has to go with the low bidder,
Right.
even if
Not
it's
necessarily
not
the
the
best
best one.
Right.
And so there are just some things that authorities have at their disposal that the city does not, which is the benefit of having
And to
these
be able to
authorities.
move faster. I think.
Be able to move faster, sometimes be able to think outside the box a little bit more. Gives an opportunity to have some fresh eyes on certain things. And so I'm prepared to present to council the details of a redevelopment authority, because I think that it may be a tool we have not brought to bear on some areas of the city that could certainly stand to have some redevelopment and make what's probably a slightly underperforming right now, and we could kind of turn it around and maybe enhance it.
There's a few places in the city that I'm sure everyone would agree that could be helped by something like this. So that's a good thing. And those are political appointees or appointed by the city council to.
Yeah, so the state generally lays out, because they're, again, set up by state statute. Right. And so they're generally laid out how those board members, those boards are populated. Right. And so it will come through council. Okay. It really will be a vote by council. Okay. How the name gets presented to council for a vote is still can be. Okay. Some cities have it to where each council member can nominate somebody. It could be any of them nominated. It could be a committee that's set up to come up with some names. It could, there's lots of it, because sometimes the city manager nominates and then they confirm. Okay. There's a number of ways it could be done. That hasn't been decided yet. But at the end of the day, council does have to vote to approve these appointees, and they do, because once that board is populated, again, they have the authority to operate in a rather independent, fashion.
So something like this could get into effect by the first quarter of next year.
It could.
Yeah. Cool.
And I know mayor and council have been very interested in doing some things, in some of the areas of the city that, they feel like they've maybe not had the bandwidth, to get into. And now they feel like they can. Okay. They've got, they've been in office long enough. We've got some of these big ticket other things like the town center that's been occupying their time and everything. And now it's time for them to turn and concentrate on some other areas. And I think this is a tool in their tool bag that could be used to the benefit of the city.
And I think people will welcome that, actually. So there was something else also. Let's get into the nuisance regulation that the city council passed also.
So all cities, unfortunately, every now and then struggle with oftentimes a property owner, or some cases it's just a parcel in which ownership is either not been identified, or there's difficulty in establishing ownership of something, and the parcel finds itself being in a state of disrepair or being utilized by squatters or whatever in a way that is negatively affecting other parcels or and other businesses or homes. And sometimes these examples become so egregious and so extreme that the city feels like it has to step in and do something, because the natural course of things are not moving fast enough. We have a parcel in an area of the city, I think it's a Mechanicsville area, that is creating a problem that we don't feel like we can wait. It's a parcel that been owned by somebody who passed away, and then ownership of that, I don't think there was a will, and it's being probated in court, and it's and finding who the owner is being
Really?
difficult, and yeah, the property taxes are not being paid on it anymore, and there's just a lot of problems. Well, this parcel also has heavy foliage on the edge of the property, including a stand of bamboo that's really thick. And as a result, it allows the interior of the parcel to be really out of sight. And we've had a homeless guy or homeless people that have squatted on there and have really pulled a lot of trash and debris and junk, and just, I mean, in a way that's, it's shocking almost how much. And then you've got animals in there and everything. And so there have been some efforts to there have been successful efforts to have some of the homeless removed and placed in other programs and everything, and the animals removed, but it keeps coming back, and in one case it's the same guy who keeps coming back, and so the debris and trash have spilled over into it being visible from the road, and so we just don't think that we can wait. And so the process is such that for the city to get involved, the first thing the city has to do is declare the property to be a nuisance.
Right.
And once it does that, it kind of opens the door for the city to be involved in some things, including we can go in and clean the property up, and then take the cost that was borne by the city to get it, to get the nuisance abated. We can put a lien on the property. And at some point when it's sold, and sometimes it could be, I mean, I've managed other cities, like especially the last city I was at, which is a very old city, we would get lien dollars coming in for properties that had a lien on it 50 years earlier.
Really?
And it had never been sold.
Right.
So there was no need to clear the title, so that lien sat on that property for a long time. So putting a lien on it doesn't guarantee the city will get anything anytime soon, but at some point.
And that's vacant land to a degree, that particular piece of property, or it's a house, but
there used to be some kind of a shed house type of thing that's been, I mean, it's been uninhabitable for probably decades.
But the idea of and I read through the nuisance regulation a little bit, if there was drug issues going on, if it was a house, for example, and it was an abandoned house and there were drug issues going on, that also gives you the ability to go in and clean that out, condemn the property maybe even.
That's correct. I mean, there are lots of things that qualify for a parcel to be, declared a nuisance. It can be health, it could be overgrown weeds, it could be derelict structures or vehicles, it could be a public health hazard like vermin, snakes, rats. It could also be criminal activity, where there's, just enough, loitering or drug or whatever kind of, activity could, prostitution, whatever. And that could be used as evidence that the property is a nuisance to the greater community. And then the city can move in and take steps to abate that nuisance.
Cool. That's good. I mean, I know the county had something similar, or maybe not as strong, because we did take over some of the county regulations when we became a city. So was that fine tuning it? Or
no, well, we've expanded since mayor and council have been on, and since the city's been created, we have added criminal activity as a qualifying nuisance that the county did not have.
Oh, okay.
And maybe still does not have.
Oh.
Well, but see, how aggressive or not cities use this kind of thing is really up to the local elected body.
Sure.
And so, most of the nuisance, abatement laws are at the, they're available to local governments, but some just either decide not to implement them, or they don't they're not as aggressive in their use of them. And it's still kind of a big, it's you don't necessarily want to have government come in and,
No,
and
of
take
course
over doing. I mean, you'd like to think that property owners are responsible with their parcels, but at a certain point, the city cannot allow one parcel to drag down all the surrounding parcels around it. And in this case, we have some businesses around it that this does not look good.
Right.
And it cannot be benefiting them in any way, shape, or form. So we just can't sit back and let the property's ownership and all it getting probated in court. It's just taking too long. We've got to move in and do something about it.
I totally agree. A city should be able to, for its citizens to be able to do the right thing, you have to have the right tools. So that makes sense to me. We're at the end of our time. And I appreciate Brian for being with us to be able to do this on a monthly basis, to be able to go through all this. We're here at Atlanta Tech Park. I should have mentioned that before. Our podcast studios here in Tech Park, Atlanta, and along the Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners, the road that we were talking about at the beginning of the 45 minutes to an hour. And so I appreciate, in the middle of City of Peachtree Corners, so I appreciate the city manager, Brian Johnson, being with me and talking, bringing us up.
Again, thanks for giving the city the venue to hopefully, help our residents and stakeholders here be a little bit more educated about what their city government is doing.
Well, the fact that, Brian, that you keep answering all my questions is a good thing. So sharing with all the new stuff that's going on.
My pleasure.
Don't miss Peachtree Corners magazine. Today's Friday, and it's coming out this week. It's hitting the post office this Friday, today. So it'll be out in the mail this weekend and over this coming week before Thanksgiving. Check out our new giveaway that's starting on Monday. It's the weekend staycation giveaway in Peachtree Corners. So you can sort of get away from, if you have kids, get away from the kids for a little bit as an overnight, have dinner, breakfast, stay at the Hilton Suite. There's $1,000 in prizes, so participate. That starts on Monday, and if we don't see you, or if you don't see us, have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks, Brian.